Welcome back to the Dormant Politics Podcast. My name is Justin Fisher.
I'm Nolan Flaherty.
And I'm Austin Vertine. On this podcast, we talk Saudi Arabia, the Migrant Caravan, and Dwight Howard's sex life.
Alright, so of course, happy holidays to all. I hope you all enjoyed a Thanksgiving if you celebrate. Hopefully you had some good family time. But the news goes on, and Dormant Politics is back this week to give you some more information. We're going to start off with some stuff about Saudi Arabia and Dwight Howard and, of course, the Migrant Caravan with all the people trying to cross the U.S. border. So let's first get into a little bit of a video clip here that shows Donald Trump's relationship with Saudi Arabia. We'll see just how contradictory he can be with his rhetoric and Saudi Arabia.
Saudi Arabia has nothing to do with me. They buy apartments from me. They spend $40 million, $50 million. Am I supposed to dislike them? I like them very much.
President, the Washington Post, in a statement, put out a statement. They said that you're putting your personal interests, your commercial interests...
Well, I have nothing to do with Saudi. Just so you understand, I don't make deals with Saudi Arabia.
I deal with the Saudis.
I don't have money from Saudi Arabia.
I don't think anybody sells much more real estate than I do to the Japanese, the Saudis, etc. They buy the most expensive apartments in the world that I happen to build. And I know the people, and I like the people.
I have nothing to do with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia, and I get along great with all of them. They buy apartments from me. They spend $40 million, $50 million. Am I supposed to dislike them? I like them very much. I have nothing to do with Saudi Arabia. I love the Saudis. Many are in this building. I have no business whatsoever with Saudi Arabia. Couldn't care less. Saudi Arabia, I like the Saudis. They're very nice. I make a lot of money with them. They buy all sorts of my stuff. All kinds of toys from Trump. They pay me millions and hundreds of millions.
Now, there's a lot of issues surrounding this Saudi Arabia scandal. One, President Trump earlier this week essentially didn't make any sort of statement about condemning the attack at all. He basically said that the United States can't do anything about it because the U.S. is too dependent on Saudi oil. That's literally what he said. We also have to take into consideration that Khashoggi did work for the Washington Post, and it is essentially an attack on the freedom of the press that MSB did. And we also have to consider the geopolitics of it all. The United States has just put even more sanctions on Iran, Saudi Arabia's biggest rival in the Middle East. So there are other things that are in play right now. We know that America is lined up with the Saudis. We know that America signed a $110 billion arms deal last year with Saudi Arabia, and we know that Saudi Arabia is using those arms to kill people in Yemen. And so there's a lot of ethical things that are going on and a lot of violations of human rights. And it didn't start this week. It didn't start this month. It's been going on for years with Saudi Arabia.
The United States' support of Saudi Arabia goes back for quite a while. It obviously most often originates with the Saudi Arabia and Iranian rivalry. And obviously we have to support Saudi Arabia because they're a rival of Iran. But, I mean, in terms of supporting Saudi Arabia with a $110 billion arms deal, the conflict in Yemen is, it's still going on, and it's just getting really disgusting. I mean, you have these horrible pictures of these starving children, and to see the United States continue to support Saudi Arabia even before the killing of this journalist, even just using that Yemen war, a Yemen conflict as a reasoning to stop supporting Saudi Arabia, I think is enough. But, you do have to take into account the geopolitical realities in the Middle East. Iran does still want to wipe Israel off the map. The United States should absolutely support Israel until the end of time. So if we picked a fight with Saudi Arabia and Iran, it would be a very difficult conflict in the Middle East. I'm not saying that we still shouldn't necessarily pick a fight with Saudi Arabia. We should at least stop supporting them. They did kill an American journalist, and they still continue to have human rights violations in their own country and, of course, in Yemen.
70,000 people in Yemen have been killed over the Saudi bombings. Now, Saudi Arabia was involved in 9/11. It's been documented. Most of the terrorists that hijacked the planes that day came from Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is exporting jihadist Islam. They're exporting Wahhabism all around the Middle East and all around the world. They are the biggest terrorist state in the world. It is not Iran. It is Saudi Arabia. We simply ignore
I mean, you're just picking the lesser of two evils at that point.
We simply ignore all the atrocities that Saudi Arabia commits in the name of the holy dollar. That's all we do. And it's quite frankly disgusting.
I don't think it should be a competition of who is the worst country, Iran or Saudi Arabia. I think two things can be true at once. Iran is giving money to terrorists, and so is Saudi Arabia. We should hate them both, right?
And I think in a competition, like you were saying, if it came down to Saudi Arabia and Israel, the United States would not choose Israel. They would choose Saudi Arabia.
The United States would absolutely choose Israel.
Absolutely
I'm not sure
between Israel and Saudi Arabia.
The United States does have a lot of business interests in Saudi Arabia. It's proven we have a lot of deals going on with them. One thing we did do to sort of counteract the killing of Jamal Khashoggi, who was a Saudi Arabian journalist, by the way, just to mention, that was very outspoken against a lot of the Saudi Arabian government, which could be a reason why they actually did kill him. Turkey had some information on the killing, saying that it was arranged by 17 Saudi officials, and he was tortured and killed in, I believe, some sort of Saudi Arabian compound. But we did impose sanctions on 17 Saudi officials for the suspected role that they have in this killing. And I'm not sure what exactly those sanctions are going to do, if anything. I mean, I'm sure most of these people are rich billionaires, as a lot of Saudis are with their oil money. But, definitely from my perspective, I don't see a need to really be involved in Iran or Saudi Arabia. They're not really benefiting either of us. I mean, we have a lot of trade. We do have a couple deals with Saudi Arabia for oil and stuff like that. But when it comes down to it, both countries are exporting terrorism, as we mentioned. It's not something that we want to be supporters of as a united world power.
Here's the thing, though. We're going to come down on Iran extremely harshly every single time they do something, even though there are multiple reports that say that Iran is still following the peace deal that Obama made in 2016 with them. They're still following it. Yet we continue to pile on sanction after sanction on Iran, destabilizing the country.
John Kerry was literally on TV and said, this money that we're unfreezing
we are
is going to end up in terrorist hands.
Economically destabilizing Iran so we can go in there and we can do regime change. Trump put John. That's the only reason. Regime change? That's the only reason why John Bolton is in the Trump administration, because for the last 15 years, the man has been spewing on Fox News and in the Bush administration and all over the country that Iran is the greatest threat to America and the world, which is absolutely not true. We ourselves are the greatest threat to ourselves. That's what we are. We continue to support dictatorships all over the world, inherently contradictory to our own values and beliefs that we cherish so much, supposedly. We continue to fund the Saudi Arabian government. We continue to fund them bombing people all over the world. We ourselves bomb people all over the world. Give me a break.
But you're doing this almost this false equivalency when you're making it a competition between Iran and Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia is a disgusting country, 100%. The United States should not be supporting Saudi Arabia. If anything, we should be starting conflict with Saudi Arabia because they killed an American journalist.
But right? There was no response from your president.
What? It's your president too.
No response.
He said, "What are we going to do about it?"
Well,
you're right wing.
The response from President Trump, by the way, President Trump, he did come out and say, of course, blaming federal officials. He didn't trust the information that the CIA gave him. He has this thing about him where he doesn't trust his federal agencies. He doesn't trust the FBI, doesn't trust the CIA when they're giving him intelligence that is providing information on these important conflicts. But yeah, he cast it down on the CIA and their assessment of the Crown Prince Mohammed, saying that they didn't order the killing, that he trusts Prince Mohammed, and even his own senators, Republican senators, are pretty split on this idea. They don't trust Trump, and they're sort of going back on what he's saying and saying, look, we can acknowledge that this is fact, that this killing happened.
Okay, wait, hold on. I still don't understand. Okay, when you and I 100% agree, and hopefully Nolan, that Saudi Arabia, disgusting country, the United States cannot support it. Agreed?
Yeah, I agree.
But Iran is also a disgusting country. You cannot tolerate so much as to tolerate intolerance.
I will not make that false equivalency because Saudi Arabia is much worse than Iran.
Well, look,
Iran is literally charging women who get raped with adultery. Are you kidding me?
Saudi Arabia doesn't let women drive.
They just started letting women drive.
It's highly regulated.
You're doing this
highly
stupid
regulated.
lesser of two evils.
Well, I mean, that's what
if
we have
you're
to
in
come
Iran
to.
and you get brutally gang
Who
raped,
said that? Who
the
said
women
that
will be
I
charged
want,
for adultery.
Who said that I want to replace Saudi
I don't
Arabia
understand.
as Iran with the greatest, with
You're
the
just
biggest
doing this
ally?
lesser. Why are you picking? Yeah, or Iran is much better than Saudi
I'm
Arabia.
saying that's the United States' policy right now. We're literally picking the lesser of two evils in our mind because that's what the lesser of two evils to our piggy bank is.
Okay,
That's what we've been
hold on.
doing.
All my problem is that we need to be in agreement that Iran and Saudi Arabia are both at the same level of low.
I disagree with
Ow!
that. I disagree with that. You know what? You know what Saudi Arabia is like, okay? Saudi Arabia
Here comes an
is...
analogy.
No, it's that one girl that, like... Okay.
This is a stupid analogy.
Okay, she cheated on you. Then her boyfriend, her new boyfriend, attacked your house. He TP'd your house. Okay? Yet, now you're friends with that boyfriend now.
How is this analogy?
You're friends with that boyfriend. Okay? Saudi Arabia attacked us on 9/11. We cannot ignore that.
Al-Qaeda attacked us on 9/11.
Saudi,
and was possibly
the
supported by
majority
Saudi
of the
Arabia.
people are from Saudi Arabia. There are multiple reports that say that Saudi Arabia's government
Just because
was
somebody's
somehow
a citizen-
involved.
That's
in
definitely
this.
fact.
Definitely fact.
Still
We cannot
speculation.
ignore that. And then we don't. My question is that if we're not going to do anything right now, when are we ever going to cut off this toxic relationship with Saudi Arabia?
When you agree that we can cut off a toxic relationship with Iran, once
We-
you agree with me that the
we
Iran deal
we
is one of
haven't
the
had a
worst
relationship.
historically foreign policies in
Okay,
the history of a country.
Iran was a high school fling, okay? Back in the 60s. It was a high school fling. And then we haven't talked to her in 50 years. And then we just started talking to her as friends.
I think
Not
this
as,
is
Such a stupid
not as lovers, as friends.
this is extremely relatable.
We love Saudi Arabia. We give
Austin.
Saudi Arabia gifts
You know what this is?
all the
You know what
time.
This is Austin's deep hatred of Israel because he's anti-Semitic. You just hate Jews.
Yep,
That's
that's
what
it.
is.
That's it.
That's what it
I
is.
don't like Saudi Arabia because I don't like Jews.
That's off the record.
Of course. All I'm saying is that we need to re-examine our policy with Saudi Arabia. We have to.
And keep our policy with Iran. Are you agreeing with me or not? You're picking a lesser of two
Well,
evils and they
our
both
policy,
suck.
our
Yeah.
policy has changed in the last
Yeah,
few
what are you
years.
saying by keep the policy? Like, what's your
The
definition
current
of...
Iran sanctions that were put in place by the Trump administration.
The Iran
The
sanctions.
eradication of the Iran deal.
The Iran sanctions are not fair to Iran because they were following the rules of the peace deal.
I mean, if you think
That's
about
a
it...
horrible regime. You cannot tolerate so much as to tolerate intolerance. Quote unquote, Bill Maher.
Okay,
Pretty smart guy.
so you don't like Saudi Arabia. Okay.
No.
You like Israel. That's an entirely
I love
different
Israel.
subject. Entirely
I don't
different
like
subject
Israel. I
that
love
commits
it.
atrocities a bunch.
Give me
Okay.
a break. Give me a break. Israel puts up with so much crap. Too much.
Here's what we need to do with Saudi Arabia. We need to make a statement, and it seems like Congress has the votes to even block a veto if President Trump blocks, if he vetoes a bill that would stop arms going to Saudi Arabia. A lot of Republican senators are now on board with this. Lindsey Graham just said
common
today,
sense. Common
if the
sense.
CIA confirms this report that MSB was involved in killing of Jamal Khashoggi, then I think that sanctions are the only option that we have.
I agree.
But we're not going to do it. I know it. It's not going to happen. The congressmen are going to say, yeah, let's do it. But then they're not going to do it. Because they're going to get bought. They're bought by the oil companies. Why would the oil companies want this? Come on.
Wait, they're bought by Saudi oil companies? That's
Oh,
100%
they're bought by
corruption.
No, they're all working together.
Why would American oil companies want to help Saudi oil companies? American oil companies want to get their oil from one place. That's the U.S. of A, baby.
I don't know about that, my
Maybe
friend.
the Gulf?
You know, BP used to be British.
Yeah, now they're spilling oil in the Gulf of Mexico.
Just because you're an American oil company doesn't mean you don't drill all around the world.
I guess you're kind of correct. But, I mean, American oil companies, I mean, do they drill less or more in Saudi Arabia? I think America usually buys oil from Saudi oil companies. I don't think Saudi Arabia allows American oil companies to go there.
The reality is we are far too dependent on Saudi oil for there to be real progress made in the relationship between America and Saudi Arabia.
There's just as much oil in Iran.
But we're not in a partnership with Iran. We blocked Iran off for 50 years. We put an embargo on them. And now we haven't even opened it up for them. Iran gives essentially Russia oil. Saudi Arabia essentially gives us oil. Now Russia is not even close to the power player it once was.
You know what country we're most dependent on for oil? The United States of America.
Yeah.
The USA in 2018 is most dependent on American oil.
Yeah, about 38.8% of the oil that the United States relies on comes from the United States. 8.1% of oil comes from Saudi Arabia, the United States.
A plurality, not a majority.
Then why did Daddy Trump say we can't do anything about this? Because
he loves Saudi Arabia. I mean, we heard it in
Saudi
the clip.
Arabia. And that's a problem. That
All
the
right.
President of the United States has conflicts of interest. And there needs to be an investigation into President Trump for...
Robert Mueller will not save you. Mueller.
Hey.
Shit.
Boys. Do you know who else has a couple conflicts of interest right now?
Who?
Dwight Howard.
I don't know if it's necessarily conflicts of interest. Let's do a quick briefing, okay? Dwight Howard, 6'11". What is he, 250 pounds, 300 pounds?
Yeah, something like that.
He's huge. Huge. 6'11". Can't walk through an average doorway without ducking his head. He's a player on the Washington Wizards. I think he used to play for the Rockets, if I'm not mistaken.
He's probably played for half the NBA.
Orlando Magic,
He's a pretty good.
Atlanta Hawks.
He's a pretty great player. Some people are surprised that he hasn't gotten a ring yet. Nonetheless, Dwight Howard, this famous basketball player, 6'11", apparently likes to engage in anal intercourse with transgender women. Then because it's men transitioning to women.
Well, here's my thing about this. Well, people
He's
in
gay.
Yes. People in the LGBTQ plus community want to be so open about having people open up themselves and allowing people the opportunity to express themselves when they are gay or when they are transgender or when they are different sexualities. But we have people like Dwight Howard's accuser here that are just outing him and really putting him in a tough situation. I mean, Dwight Howard, I understand that like he might have threatened this woman or this woman. She was formerly a man. I can't remember. Her name is Masin Aliji or something like that.
So this man that was also formerly a man?
Yeah, this man that is now a woman. Okay, Justin, thank you.
The man that is also formerly a man.
This man that is now a woman, Justin. Okay. But I don't understand why she would want to out Dwight Howard like this, because the community wants people to open up and just be themselves, but they don't allow people to open up on their own terms. And I mean, if Dwight Howard...
Funny. That's why she did it. Because
she clearly has some backlash and blackmail intentions on Dwight Howard.
That person is famous.
Jesus. I just can't wait for her to be interviewed by on ESPN in about a couple weeks, just to give the details about it. I mean, I'm not bothered by it.
No, I think...
It reminds me of The Sopranos. Okay? Ralph Cifaretto used to take it up the ass all the time in the show.
I was so shocked to hear that. That was funny as hell.
Okay. But that was by a woman, okay? Some people like kinky stuff, you know?
I mean...
And whatever happens in the bedroom isn't necessarily anybody's business except those two people. And if one of those people want to release that stuff, they can do whatever they want. Come on, how many sex stories does everybody hear on a day-to-day basis? You know? Without the consent of the other person... I hear a ton.
I mean, you don't necessarily need the consent of the other person to share a story.
Exactly.
It's your story as much as it is the other person. I mean, it doesn't make her any less shitty, but it's still
why
pretty
does it
funny.
make her shitty?
I mean, you don't really. It's kind of private information.
It is private. I'm sure Dwight Howard feels embarrassed.
I mean, how does he walk into practice? Like, does
Oh
John Wall ask him like what's going on? I kind of feel bad.
I can't imagine.
That's why I just feel like people should have the opportunity to express their own sexuality when they want to, and I feel like this woman definitely manipulated Dwight Howard in this situation, and it makes people not want to share their sexuality even more when Howard gets teased on Twitter. I mean, I'm sure you guys have seen the memes, all the stuff that's going on about Dwight Howard on Twitter. So give it a quick search if you haven't. Some of the things are funny, but definitely not in the homophobic sense. But definitely a tough situation for one of the NBA's former stars.
Borderline Hall of Famer, in my opinion. Anyway, I want to get to some breaking news from today. We heard today that General Motors has announced that they are cutting 15%, 14,700 jobs from their payroll in America. Now, GM was bailed out in 2009 by the Obama administration.
Wow, look what it did.
And look at what has
the
happened.
federal
Look at
government
how
involved.
Look at how they pay the American customer back.
Come on, Justin, it's an American company. We got to save it, buddy.
Yeah,
No.
the forgotten man.
Save it with the free market.
As Trump said, the forgotten man will not be left behind.
In
no
2009,
more.
do you remember in the auto bailout from Barack Obama, do you remember the only company that didn't get a bailout from the federal government?
Who?
It was Ford. You look at Ford stocks today, you look at Ford's assets today, they're booming. They're skyrocketing.
GM is the one who wanted a bailout.
Yeah.
Let's be clear.
And they got it. And it didn't help. It didn't help. All it did is steal taxpayer money, and now we lost 15,000 jobs. In reality, if GM was going under, GM should have gone under.
I know
Just
a corporation...
because he subsidized somebody from the federal government doesn't mean their practices fixed.
Is amoral. There are no morals. Because they're neither ethical or unethical. Okay? They're only working for the dollar.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
I mean, that's why they're allowed to cut their payroll back.
It's disturbing. And I feel like it's going to be a trend over the next decade or two where this is going to become more and more frequent because of automation.
Not necessarily. I mean,
this is coming in an area. This is coming in Michigan, in Ohio, where they don't need this whatsoever.
Okay,
this is the worst
you're very
possible
scared.
News.
You have this horrible fear of automation, artificial intelligence, right? That we're going to have horrible amounts of unemployment because of automation.
I have fears about it because income inequality right now is so high, and the people that are going to be making the robots are already the ones that are wealthy. And those people are only going to get more wealthier, and the people that are going to be losing jobs are only going to get more poor. And we're going to see that disparity in this country get even larger than it is, to a point where it becomes unsustainable, and then violence starts to happen.
But, I mean, we've seen automation in the past. I mean, since the Industrial Revolution, the amount of automation that goes into making an automobile is outrageous. And we haven't seen vast increases of unemployment. I mean, the market will naturally react. When you have more increases in automation, newer jobs are created. I mean, that's what we've seen in a free market economy since the early 17th century.
There's got to be a couple differences to that. One, the Industrial Revolution in the early 20th century still had a giant demand for labor, for people. Mm-hmm. They were machines, but there were still people that needed to run the machines.
In that time, there was a huge demand for labor.
We don't need people to run the machines. The machines can run for themselves. Secondly, our education system is not helping this cause whatsoever. We are not training enough people to become engineers, and we're not meeting the demands of the 21st century economy in this country. And our education system is at fault for this.
What's your stance? That we have too high of a demand for labor, or that we have such a low demand for labor that there's going to be an outbreak of violence? I'm confused. Which one is it?
I'm saying that there are things that we can do to solve this upcoming problem that's getting closer and closer and closer. It's like a hurricane that's coming, right? And it's getting to like a Category 2 or 3 right now. It'll be a Category 5 pretty soon. And there's going to be people that are losing jobs all the time.
It's only going to be a Category 5 if the federal government gets involved.
Just wait until the truck drivers start losing their jobs.
Well, I actually do agree with President Trump's stance on this. He has said that he told GM, look, we've done a lot for you as a company, especially in the President Obama's term, and that if cars aren't selling, the company's going to just have to produce cars that are going to sell. I mean, that's what it comes down to.
Amen.
But the problem is that Trump's rhetoric does not match whatsoever.
You're definitely right. He has said, like, the jobs are coming back. They're all going to come back.
The jobs are going to come back.
Which that doesn't help people.
Daddy Trump
you have to
gives
be realistic
tax cuts.
He
gives tax cuts, and this is how the companies reward
But yeah, he's definitely not
for
realistic.
the tax cuts.
The tax
for the companies
cuts
that already get tax credits off.
The tax cuts cannot save a company that's already going to fail. GM was set to fail in 2009 before they were bailed out.
And they bounced back. And this is how they
bounced back. Losing 15,000 jobs is bouncing back.
This is a decision by them to cut labor costs
because they're not making enough money because the federal government subsidy
they're greedy
did nothing.
bastards. That's what they are.
What?
Well, they're just trying to stay afloat in this scenario, but also when it comes to automation, it's cheaper definitely, and you don't have to pay.
Look
workers,
at GM stocks right now. You think they're going up? GM is still down for the year about 12%. Because even when let's look at the reason why GM wasn't doing so well in 2009. They were having bad practices that weren't producing good enough cars, and people went to Ford because Ford was producing better cars. That's why Ford didn't need to be bailed out in 2009. So when you subsidize the bad practices of GM, those bad practices don't change, the cars don't get better, GM just gets a Band-Aid that's going to last until 2018. When now their bad practices are still taking place, their trucks and cars aren't as great as Ford and other competitors, so now they're losing money. Their stock is down 12% this year, and now they're losing 14,000 jobs.
So your solution is to let the invisible hand figure this out, then?
Yes, absolutely. If you keep subsidizing GM, then they're just going to have crappier cars.
I'm not a fan of subsidizing. I understand your point.
So I'm just saying, if this company has shitty practices where they're not producing good enough cars that don't sell, then the company's destiny is only going to fail. If you continue to subsidize that, then you're just costing taxpayer money, and you're just creating GM into almost like a public sector corporation that's not even producing anything of substance. And more Americans are going to continue to go to Ford, and more Americans are going to be more irritated that we're subsidizing a company that they don't want or need.
I don't even think it's that Americans are going to Ford. It's Americans are getting Toyotas, Hondas, anything from overseas because it's a better quality car and you can get it at a cheaper price. I mean,
Amen.
American cars are really on the down right now, and I don't know.
Ford ain't doing too bad.
I'm not sure that
Honda's incredible.
A bailout would do anything for GM in this scenario again.
GM doesn't need another bailout.
Is GM a country?
So, I mean, what's the solution what do you want Donald Trump to do in this situation where we lost 15,000 jobs?
I want there to be accountability. Okay? 15,000 people right before Christmas are losing their jobs all across this country. That is sad. As a country,
who is accountable?
That one of the greatest corporations in the last 100 years in this country that has produced good stuff throughout its time,
but they're not doing it anymore.
This is how they treat Americans now.
Who do you want to be accountable?
I want GM to be held accountable.
What do you want GM to do? What do you want to tax them to?
Slap on the wrist?
Yeah, you want to raise their taxes? You want to fine them?
Raise their taxes.
Oh,
absolutely.
Okay. You're right. You know what? That's more workers are going there. Then they're gonna have so much money after they're raising taxes.
What's the solution? Then?
Let GM fail. If GM isn't producing cars well enough, the federal government should not punish them.
Who's to say the reason that GM cut these jobs? We don't necessarily know that yet. Is that they're not producing as good of a car? That's a totally subjective opinion.
No, it's not.
Well, here's the thing.
Why is GM stock going down? Why is GM making less money then? They only sell one thing. They sell cars.
I think also
so if their assets are going down, they're not selling enough cars. And if Americans aren't buying their cars, it's because Honda's producing a wonderful car. I personally know this. Honda is amazing. You ever look at the brake system on Honda? So simple. I could change it when I was 3.
enjoy Honda too, Nolan. What's going on?
I think Austin brings up an interesting point here. We give corporations power in that we cut their taxes, all based on the idea that it's going to create jobs. Why in our country don't we create a tax system where we give tax breaks to corporations that actually create jobs?
It's a messed up way of thinking.
It's like a backwards way that we tax corporations where we just assume that they're going to create jobs. And I'm not saying that GM is going to be a greedy corporation with this cut of jobs right now, but I'm just saying that the way that we tax corporations makes no sense, and that we should be giving tax breaks to companies that actually create jobs.
Nolan's absolutely right. We have a messed up way of incentivizing job creation that does not actually incentivize job creation. Whether it's an income tax or a corporate tax, we give tax cuts with the thought that people are going to make jobs. And when we find out that reality is not reality, and that's not true, then we don't do anything about it. at all.
Austin, you're 100%
What happened?
absolutely
What happened to a
wrong.
merit-based system
Well, so why does GM...
for a corporation?
Okay, wait. You guys are both wrong, but if you want to hear my take, you can go check out dormroompolitics.com. We got a beautiful episode on taxes. It covers all the basics.
So, well, just give me this, if you're going to be a little dick about it and just not give me your real answer. Give me this. Why should GM have lower tax rates if now they're cutting jobs? Like, it doesn't make any sense. It seems counterintuitive.
Why should GM get subsidies if they're going to cut jobs?
Well, they're not getting any subsidies now.
A
A tax cut is a subsidy in itself.
Yeah, but not necessarily. A tax cut is allowing a company to keep more of their own money that they make. Why should GM not get a tax cut? If when GM gets a tax cut, when GM is more likely to be affected by market forces, then GM is going to go under. And that's not necessarily a bad thing when GM is producing bad cars. Because if we continue this idea that a corporation's responsibility is to employ people, then we're going to get to this idea that it's the government's responsibility to support corporations because it's the government's responsibility to create jobs. And it's just a bad slippery slope.
Well, here's what you ignore. In 2015, GM paid $0 in corporate taxes. 43% of the corporations in this country don't pay a dime in corporate tax. So why are you, the Republican Party, and Trump so ignorant on this fact, and all you guys keep talking about with your rhetoric is we need to keep cutting corporate taxes so that jobs can be created. The jobs aren't being created. Companies already don't pay taxes.
Why are they not paying any taxes?
They get out of it. Loopholes.
What are
Deductions.
loopholes?
Deductions, loopholes.
They're not illegal.
And that's
they're
a part-
deductions
that's-
that we have written into the tax code.
That's exactly.
So
that's
corporations are purposely dodging taxes through legal deductions.
Corporations buy off legislators so that they can get tax
And
cuts.
maybe this
and
is
that's the problem.
So I'm
The tax
100%
code-
in favor of making the tax code simpler.
The tax code won't be simpler by cutting taxes or making a flat tax. The tax code will be simpler when we get rid of loopholes. Either way, we know that the GM situation is a very stressful situation, and moving forward, it will be interesting to see how the government reacts, how the people react as well, because GM is a very famous company, and a lot of people still drive GM cars. So we'll see what the backlash is on that. Moving on. Earlier this week, there were a few migrants that have made it to the border.
A few is an underestimate there. There is a lot.
A lot of migrants
Hundreds.
have made it to the border, and they were met by the U.S. military, who eventually tear gassed a lot of these people. So this is another situation where Trump is, I'm guessing, calling the shots on this. So I want to get your guys' reaction on the use of tear gas. Is that an ethical thing to do on migrants?
Well, here's what I think Trump is right about, and I think he's right to blame Mexico for some of these problems. I mean, a lot of these people coming from Mexico, coming from other Latin American countries, they're not doing a good job of taking care of their people. It's clear. But at the same time, I think the United States can be a place for some of these people to seek asylum, and for a place for some of these people to get jobs. But as far as tear gas use, I think that's a little bit unnecessary. I know a lot of the people were trying to cross the border illegally since they had arrived at the border and were met by the U.S. military, and the border was closed temporarily to try to deal with the situation overall. But yeah, the use of tear gas, a lot of it is extreme in this situation. I mean, these are people that are just in need of help what it comes down to. But I think definitely the United States can be a place of opportunity for these people. It always has been and always will be. There are always jobs that are available, believe it or not. Even though we have unemployed people, there are jobs that are available. That's what it comes down to. And if our country can be a place for someone to get a job, to start a new life, I think there should be nothing wrong with that, and we should let some of these people in.
Well, the use of tear gas is kind of a little bit extra.
It's excessive.
Excessive. You can't necessarily blame the United States Army for that. The U.S. Army is acting 100% under the discretion of their commanders and the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States. I mean, they were given a task: don't let the migrant caravan into the country. And the commanders in the area obviously felt that tear gas was necessary to disperse the crowd and prevent them from entering the country. It is still illegal to come into the country illegally, to illegally immigrate into the country. So it's not unusual for a military of a country to prevent a certain group of people from coming into the country illegally.
It's a very complex situation. A lot of these people are looking for asylum, which is different than
It's not illegal at all.
No.
To come to the border to seek asylum is not illegal. So, I mean, some of those people that were trying to come, it depends where they were actually coming in from the border and how the legal ramifications of it work. Because there are different stations where you have to approach specifically to request asylum. And there are different areas around the border that if you go through, you will be met with Border Patrol and the United States Army. So it does depend where they were coming in from the border, if they were wanting to seek asylum. If they were coming into an area where there was not a station to request asylum, then it is not necessarily unusual for the United States Army to use.
And tell me if I'm wrong, most of the migrants were coming through Arizona and California. That's where most of the military was deployed, at those borders in those states.
Near Tijuana, the border between Tijuana and the United States.
But don't get me wrong, I mean, we had thousands of troops at that border.
Well, I mean, it shows that Donald Trump does not provide a solution that is practical. I mean, as far as he just puts walls in between our country and other countries. And I mean, he knew that these people were coming. It was going to happen. I mean, they made this trek, some from all the way from Honduras. Some of these people just walking, driving, caravanning together just to get to the United States to have the opportunity to come and make a better life. And I mean, his solution was to put the U.S. Army on the border rather than try to implement a program to get asylum for some of these people. He didn't make an attempt to even help most of these people. His solution was just to try to drive them back. And I mean, I do understand where he's coming from as far as trying to hold Mexico and some of these other countries accountable for not properly treating these people. And I mean, some of the human rights violations as far as the cartel control in Mexico is absolutely disgusting as far as how much influence they have on the police system and the government within Mexico as itself. It's no reason that these people want to come to the United States and try to make a better life. So I think what we see is Donald Trump doesn't have a clear solution to this as we stand.
Well, his whole mantra is America first, no matter what. And like we've seen in Saudi Arabia, and like we've seen with GM in this podcast, Trump is not putting America first in these situations. And with this situation, I don't think he's putting America first either. I think he's ignoring basic human rights. I think that he's ignoring a lot of what this country has stood for in the past and what it continues to strive for. So it's a sad situation that we're in as a country where we have a nativist that is not letting asylum seekers into the country. I understand we need reform with illegal immigration. We cannot continue to have rates of illegal immigration because we know that they ultimately suppress wages and it's not beneficial for a developed country. But asylum seekers is it's a totally different thing. And I think that Trump is leaving a bad mark on American history with this. Well, that was a very eventful podcast. A lot of topics were discussed today, some good banter and debate. Next Monday, we'll be coming out with a new podcast. Even though we're right now in a lame duck session in Congress, there's a lot still going on in the news cycle, and Dorm Room Politics is here to cover everything. So I'm Austin Vertine.
I'm Nolan Flaherty.
And I'm Justin Vert.
He is not Justin Vertine, he's Justin Fisher. He doesn't know his own name.
And I'm Justin Fisher. We'll see you guys next time.